Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Commie Reading Group. We'll be continuing Chapter 4 of Capital's Grave by Jodi. Hey, Soul Schnell, how you doing? Great to see you. We left off on Nobody Cares. We can distinguish two modulates of Nobody Cares. The first requires a predicate, the designation of an object that nobody cares about. As soon as an object is named, the sentence becomes contradictory. Clearly, somebody cares, namely, the person worried that nobody else cares. Although I say nobody cares in saying this, I am expressing that I care and you should too. But instead of directly saying I care and you should too, the statement nobody cares expresses a lack that it accompanies but cannot fulfill. Because the lack can't be filled. I may care, but that's not enough. It's utterly inadequate to the endless care that is required. My inadequacy is exposed and displaced onto the absent subject supposed to care. The first mode of nobody cares is moralization. It's an expression of concern voiced as a judgment that carries an unstated command. It's shameful, outrageous, that nobody cares. An article in the Jewish Chronicle on the Gaza Solidarity encampments quoted a third-year student named Julia. No one cares. None of my friends who aren't Jewish have asked me how I'm doing. The hearer or the reader is held as someone who should feel the same way, who should join in the outrage. If they are interpellated by this hail, then they too will care. The moralization modally is thus performative rather than constative. It doesn't describe a situation. It tries to change a situation, indirectly, by insinuating that one should care without straightforwardly demanding it. Voiced through a statement of absence, the dimension of the utterance is free-floating, amorphous. What makes the interpellation effective is shame. I should care about Haiti and climate change and corruption and students' feelings, not because any of these are my fault or things that I can affect, but because of the kind of person I am. Am I someone who cares or not? Am I a member of an ethical and social world that acknowledges deep interconnections and feels something when these interconnections are broken? If it stings to discover that I have not cared about something I should, then I will feel a sense of shame, evaluated only by joining the community of those who care about X. The matter at hand. I assume the ought to avoid the shame. Communicative capitalism provides networked opportunities to form this assumption. When I like and share and change my profile pic, I demonstrate to myself most of all that I am someone who cares. But assuming that ought won't be enough, that somebody cares doesn't negate nobody cares. It adds to it, intensifies it. Now more people feel that nobody cares. Starting to care, being interpellated as caring, does not produce the subject supposed to care. It just expands the affective sense of incapacity endangered by its absence. The second model of nobody cares is reactive. Here somebody says nobody cares in response to an internal statement of concern. As a response, it aims to deflect or unravel the concern. The soup is salty. I stumble over my words. I had to miss the party. My hair looks terrible. That nobody cares is a wreath, whether confronting or indifferent. It says, forget about what is concerning you. You're free. There's no need to feel hemmed in by others' expectations. Whereas the first modality is binding, the second is liberating. From what? The first modality. The second doesn't simply express an obliviousness to social ties. It actually negates it. They aren't there. They don't hold. And to think that they do is to wrap yourself in an illusion that is harmful, that holds you back. An episode in U.S. politics from May 2022 exemplifies the point. The then House Minority Leader, Kevin McCarthy, a Republican, entirely held Trump responsible for the January 6, 2021 assault on the Capitol. But given Trump's grip on the Republican Party, McCarthy backed down. He said that he never blamed Trump. The New York Times found a video where McCarthy explicitly blamed Trump. McCarthy continued to deny it. Despite the video evidence, the Republican talking point on the matter was nobody cares. Since Republicans view the New York Times as anti-Trump, its words don't matter, and nobody else cares. McCarthy and the rest of his party were liberated from any expectation of consistency or accountability, which their words will generate. There are no ties that bind. Nobody cares. Similarly, in the UK, Conservative members of Parliament didn't care that the Prime Minister has a party while the rest of the country was stuck in lockdown. They too were shameless in the liberation from the expectation that words have binding power. They had the privilege not to care. The non-duped win. Melania Trump expressed a variation on the same theme in October 2018 at a visit to a shelter in Texas, in which migrant children were being detained. She wore a jacket that said, "I don't really care, do you?" She later explained that the message was meant for left-wing bullies in the social media, in the media, I mean. A way to tell them that she didn't care what they said about her. Their words didn't matter. She would go on doing what she thought was right. The binding and liberating modalities of nobody cares proposes the same subject. The absent subject supposed to care. Lacan describes the process of transference in a course of psychoanalysis via the subject supposed to know. The analysis and similarly to talk in analysis because she assumes that the analysis knows what's up with her, the secret of her desire, what it all means, how to cure her symptoms or end her suffering. The subject supposed to know is a premise of the analytic relationship. Zizik presents the subject supposed to believe as a conservative feature of the symbolic order. A way to understand the trust that institutionally proposes. In construct in contrast to the expectational quality of the analytic relation and its basis in a subject supposed to know, the everyday operation of the symbolic order relies on the displaced substantation of an other who believes. Santa Claus is an easy example. People go through the motions for the sake of children who believe in him. The motions produce the spirit of Christmas as the effect. The humor of Christmas movies is often that the children know full well that Santa isn't real. They pretend to believe for the sake of their parents. Education and legality likewise pursues others who believe in them. For many faculty, part of the undermining effect of moving courses onto Zoom during the pandemic was the confrontation with rows of black boxes denoting the absolute minimal degree of engagement with a lecture. That minimum wasn't enough to support a belief that we were teaching. Pre-recording lectures are even worse. Now, in addition to unread readings, we give unheard lectures to an app. More to the point, the institutionally of education proposes others who believe in it, the employers who value degrees, the auxiliary boards who attest to standards, the alumni and graduates who validate their experience, repeating the names of their alma maters with appreciation. Education matters to those who believe it's important. Legality is more than a force. It extends beyond the activities of police via practices through which police can be believed to be different from armed vigilantes and criminals. The passive expression can be believed points to the subject supposed to believe. There doesn't have to be an actual person who believes. In fact, such a person often appears naive. Belief is displaced and deferred, positioned as a basic condition. Someone somewhere believes that a badge and a uniform indicate that their barriers are authorized to stop cars, search our homes, carry weapons, and issue orders. Someone somewhere believes vaccinations are safe. Money is an acceptable means of exchange. The election was fair. The monarchy makes sense, and so on. Trust, credibility, and minimal degree of charity categorizes institutionality as such. University presidents and administrators went far in undermining belief in education and legality in April 2024, as they called police to their campuses to tear down their students' Gaza Solidarity encampments. Columbia University led the way, not only because President Minochi Shafik's constitutional testimony undermined basic assumptions of academic freedom by pandering to Republican representatives Elise Stefanik's aggressive and narrow-minded questioning, but because Shafik's decision to call in hundreds of police, brutally arresting hundreds of students, disregard faculty government procedures, move all classes to Zoom, and cancel graduation revealed the university no longer to be a place for thinking and learning. It was a walled fortress devoted of students and faculty. Nothing but real estate and police in the service of big donors. On April 30th, 2024, UCLA did its part as police stood by with masked counter-protesters violently attacking students at their peaceful encampment. The counter protesters sprayed chemicals at the students, shot fireworks into the encampments, and swung at them with poles and boards. Some wore clothes featuring pro Israel slogans and blared a song about the military campaign against Gaza. Others were recognizable figures for California's far right, having been active in the anti trans and anti vaccine movements and photographed making Nazi salutes. When the police arrived at UCLA, the counter protesters cheered, USA, USA, USA. The more we doubt that there is a subject who believes, the more we hear and see others act in ways that contradict what we thought we all accepted to be true about social norms and institutions, the more fragmented and unstable the symbolic order becomes. The subject supposed to believe can't fulfill its symbolic function. Our experience today is of multiple, contradictory, and incompatible beliefs. Different communities believe different things. What makes them different communities are the different beliefs that tie them together. Some today, such as those who attack LGBTQ plus people in the name of the traditional family, are those who insist on buttressing and specific Judeo-Christian vision of culture and society, attempt to shore up a unity that was always a myth. Others on social media and in the neoliberal university urge us to care about different beliefs and experiences, but not too much. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion, except about Palestine, and we are wrong to think and speak otherwise. When the symbolic order is functioning, people typically suppress their knowledge of its founding and ongoing violence. Heroic origin stories, rituals, progress narratives, and so on cover over systematic violence. Under conditions where the symbolic is fragmented and declining, the underlying violence can no longer be denied. It's felt, overwhelming, threatening, and exhausting. The system is nothing but misogynistic, racist, settler colonialist, fascistic, exploitative, and oppressive. Nobody cares. Nobody cares but can register, because care can't register. There is no big other who could care in a setting where the subject supposed to believe is already fragmented, polarized, multiple. Small others can care, but multiple small others don't add up to a big one. The big others requires a change in register. The abstract symbolic level of representation. Practical activities of caring, circulating statements of care, don't generate the subjects supposed to care. This subject only appears as missing in statements of generalized incapacity. Individuated and small group activities don't compensate for the absence they respond to and market. We wouldn't be having to do all this if somebody cared. For example, the typical neoliberal response to any problem that arises in the general setting of communicative capitalism is demanding transparency, providing more information, publishing a list, displaying ingredients, holding workshops or trainings. All such measures deflect and deprives responsibility for a central agent or subject. It's up to the individual who cares to do with them what she will. The social manner. Let's return to the two modalities of nobody cares. The moralistic and the liberating, the binding, and the freeing, the stinging, and the soothing. Since they index the absence of the big other, these modes operate in a field where the imaginary and the real blur together, where there is no symbolic transcendence, no third party from which conflict is resolved. The modalities operate on the plane of imaginary, on the plane of the imaginary, amid relations of fear, rivalry, and aggression. The statement "nobody cares" can be an attack, an attempt to dominate others by asserting a particular concern as primary. Even mentioning something else that should be cared for can be taken as an aggressive affront, an instance of illegitimate whataboutism. In its liberating mode, nobody cares, may be dismissive, abandoning. Stop complaining, stop making excuses, stop asserting yourself and your issues. You don't matter. It's no wonder that politics collapse into conflicts about language, the meanings of words, what can and cannot be said, and who decides. Absent the protection of the signifier, statements directly reflect the power of the one who makes them. Their content matters less than the wealth of or prestige of the utterer, which has different degrees of force in different contexts. The speaker trumps the spoken. Strengths come from recognizing that any force words have its effect on a social convention. To be free of that convention. All that's necessary is recognizing that any bond is personal, local, and matter of the specific ties accepted in one's own group. When the political is personal, struggles erupt over privilege and servility. Who can get away with what, and who has to bend the knee? Without criticism or irony, the Nobel Prize winning economist Paul Krugman observes that billionaires command deference, even servility, from those who depend on their largesse. He cautions that condemning difference may not be a particularly smart move, since people will tell billionaires what they want to hear. It could even be dangerous if it leads to political alliance with authoritarians. Authoritarians, I mean. Willing to run roughshod over the rule of law. Yet Krugman's warning seems tone deaf in the context of commanded servility, of personal ties of dependence born of extreme inequality. Notice the relations of servility he evokes is not an employment relation, it's a dependent relation. Mark Bloch reminds us that the feudal system meant the rigorous economic subjugation of a host of humble folks to a few powerful men. Krugman appeals to liberal norms in neo-feudal setting. Government by men has already supplemented government by law. Rather than abstract law applying equal to each and all, expectations and obligations are differentiated in terms of one's place in hierarchical networks of privilege. The powerful expect loyalty from their dependents. Those lower on the food chain fawn over, cater to, and serve the interest of their betters, hoping if it not to rise, then at least for a little protection from the worst of the fall. The rule of law has already crumbled. Privilege is the knowledge that one doesn't have to play by the common rules. The substitution of personalized ties for the abstract and general relations associated with bourgeoisie modernity imbues the present with its new feudal structure of fueling. Bloch's description of links is hier- hierarchical. Chain joining great and small evokes our own hierarchized networks. Struggles around privilege and status, perpetually refought, never won, replaced any sense of guaranteed rights. There is no resolution. Hegel's figure of the lord and bondsman, dialectically reversing the one into the other, helps eliminate these effective dimensions of the neo-feudal social manner, drawing out the multiple references to the struggle between the lord and the bondsman throughout Hegel's work. Andrew Cole insists on its fundamentally feudal dialect. The struggle personifies a primary conflict in feudal society, the conflict over possession. To work or use the land didn't mean one owned it. Owning wasn't significant for benefiting from land, and title depended on personal hierarchical relations of fealty and protection. Hegel explains in his lectures on the philosophy of history. The feudal lords or great barons enjoyed, properly, properly speaking, no free or absolute possession any more than their dependents. They had unlimited power of the latter, but at the same time, they also were vassals of princes higher and mightier than themselves, and to whom they were engagements, which, it must be confused, they do not fulfill except under compulsion. Not only does the struggle over possession occur within a personal hierarchical relation, but inseparable from it is inseparable from a broader network of coercive and protective relations. No one is independent. Everyone depends on someone for something, which makes them vulnerable by putting them at a permanent risk of domination or annihilation. In Seminar 3, Lacan uses the struggle between the lord and bondsman to explain the order of the imaginary. Lacan follows his teacher, Alexander Kojève, in using the terms master and slave, and in convincing the struggle as a matter of autonomy and recognition. The struggle is fought over an object, a thing. Cole emphasizes that the thing is land. Lord and bondsman each desire the thing because the other desires it. What's at stake for Lacan then is primary rivalry fought out via the thing. He tells the story as a tale of the Lord's idiocracy, idiocy. It was no way the object of enjoyment that was at issue, but rivalry as such. The Lord wants the bondsman recognition, but the recognition of a bondsman is worthless. So even though the master gets to enjoy the thing, he doesn't get what he really wanted. For Lacan, this primitive competition is overcome in speech. Speech is always a pact, an agreement. People get one with one another. They agree. This is yours. This is mine. This is this, and this is that. Without agreement in speech, without the pact, the rivalry continues, and with it, the possibility of annulling or being annulled. Cole's emphasis on the feudal dialect suggests a version of the pact where matters are not so simple. The rivalry continues. Something might be sort of yours and sort of mine, and it will all depend on who has the strength and the will to make it so. What the Lord really wants is the recognition of a higher Lord, a prince granting him title to some land. But even that won't be enough, because without bondsmen of his own to work the land, the Lord can't enjoy it. And even with bondsmen of his own, he can at any moment be called upon to perform loyalty obligations associated with vassalage. Packs thus function the little objects circulating within a setting of networked struggles rather than as ways to resolve them. Lots of little packs don't add up to a big one. Agreement in speech isn't enough to resolve much of anything for very long. In his close reading of Hegel and Lacan, Milan Diller shows how lordship is effectively the fantasize of the bondsman. Diller writes, if lordship is a symbolic relation, not something based on external repression, then fantasy is the way that this relation can be actual for the subject, the minimal part of illusion necessary for domination. If lordship is not a symbolic relation, if it is something based on external repression, then domination doesn't need to be accompanied by illusion. That lords are vassals means that they have been compelled to agree. They've been forced to accept a protective arrangement with a king or higher lord. Compulsion goes all the way down through the packs linking high and low. Submission is provisional. Lacan considers psychosis in terms of imaginary dialect. For what of being able in any way to reestablish his pact with the other? For what of being able to make any symbolic mediation whatsoever between what is new and himself? The subject moves into another mode of medication, completely different from the formal, and substitutes for symbolic meditation a perfusion, an imaginary pro-lifetarian, into which the central signal of a possible meditation is introduced in a deformed and profound asymbolic fashion. Absent the meditation on the symbolic, the subject is confined to the imaginary. Here everything is fragmented and multiplied, decomposed into a multitude of imaginary beings, decomposed in parcelization at the level of the subject. It doesn't usher in a new kind of psychic freedom, but rather the intrusion of every more aggressive rivalries, even more threats and substations of threats. Consider some examples. An economic institution puts together a gender-inclusive task force for data management. One of its goals is updating the forms of the institution used to collect data. A premise behind the task force's work is that asking a person about their identity in a manner that is based on best practices can help people feel seen and included. The grammar of the sentence implies that people who ask the questions feel seen and included. The sentence doesn't say anything about the people answering questions. The slippage suggests an imaginary identification mediated by the form people are instructed to fill out. I feel seen and included when I ask questions about gender, and the form does this for me. The form includes separate categories for gender identity, pronouns, legal sex, and sexual orientation. There are multiple options within each category, including prefer not to answer and not listed above. The gender identity, pronouns, and sexual orientation categories each include 7 options in addition to preferred not to answer and not listed above. Does the multiplication of categories on a form turn the form into an object capable of communicating respect or even care? The demand is overwhelming. So many categories to consider, so many possibilities of misrecognition oneself. Possibilities the form simultaneously avails and denies with its profusion of options. How will the answers be used? For whose enjoyment are they provided? In addition to triggering anxiety, the form might elicit a paranoid response. What business is this of yours? Why is someone trying to pin me down? Another example, elections. Typically, we think of elections in terms of going to vote and then hearing the outcome. In the US, as elections have become more fraught, we learn more about details. Voting machines that may or may not work, bags of ballots, blank ballots, local election officials, state officials who oversee recounts, legal proceedings involving what and how recounts are carried out, political struggles over who has the right to certify or challenge election results. Once the process is decomposed into its elements, its legitimacy appears more uncertain. It's easier to see where things can go wrong, where people can assert their interests, how power and privilege enter the picture. It's harder to see how the pieces cohere into a whole. What were ritualized processes of social order appear rotten, sustained by private enjoyment and everyday realities of breakdown and dysfunction. There's no big other of the symbolic, only rivalrous little others circulating through their network of dependency. In his seminar on anxiety, Lacan writes, if what we're dealing with is too much, then you're not lacking it. The subject supposed to care is missing, but the missing doesn't register as lack. What registers are the inescapable demands and unavoidable enjoyments of the other. We can't find a space safe for the excess drowning, suffocating, obliterating us. It's all too much, even when it's not enough. Now we're going into the subject who cares. Many on the left think of sovereignty as the enemy. Antonio Negri is prominent of this view. The truth is that fragmentation indicates the absence of the universal, the loss of that symbolic location from which we can make sense of the world and achieve a bit of respite from anxiety, rivalry, and aggression. Fragmentation, the collapse of the symbolic, and the parcelization of sovereignty makes it inaccurate to specific neo-feudal subject, but we can recognize its absence, trafficking the effects of this absence in our psychotic affective landscape. When all ties are personal, the stronger, whether in wealth, prestige, or shamelessness, prevail. People become motivated by their proximity to strength, like so many vessels courting favor from lord and king. Service isn't valued as care; it's associated with servility, as deference is expected and inscribed at every turn. Knowing who betters are is affected through an espionology of pain, and we never know when or from where another blow will strike. Lacan says that anxiety is only ever surmounted when the other has been named. He's talking about love, transference, and the desire of the analyst. But we can glimpse political possibility here in his evocation of a kind of structuring guidance in relation to a place or position that cuts through the demands and enjoyment absorbing us. To name the other means to put in place a structure through which one can make sense of the world and one's place in it. This is never purely an individual endeavor. Analyst can't be done alone. Lacan takes issue with Freud's attempt at self-analysis. It requires the presence of another who can help us separate ourselves from what torments us. The analysis is irreducible to the individuality of a person. Their listening is informed by a discipline, by teaching, practice, and institution. In left politics, this is the place of the Communist Party. The party provides an effective structure counter to the catastrophic anxiety pervading neo-feudalism. It organizes the transformational space of the subject supposed to know as the knowledge of a collective political subject. Like the knowledge of the clinic, the knowledge of the party arise over time and struggle. Like the discipline of analysis, the discipline of the party is a matter of practice, a necessary condition of practical action. One of the ways that the party provides relief from anxiety is through its line. Rather than endless multiplicity, the party provides direction, clarifying expectations and establishing boundaries. The party installs from its members a symbolic order that encompasses and decomposed a proliferation proliferation of the imaginary. Oh dear, I lost my spot. There we go. Another way to express the same point through the party, the members establish these expectations for themselves. The party is the form enabling this establishment. This expression of common acceptance of shared expectations. One need not be blown about by neo-feudal's prevailing winds. One can be steadfast in knowing from what and with whom one stands. In a setting of rivalry and aggression, we know which side we are on. We have comrades who have our backs. We don't go into political struggle unarmed and alone. Our steadfastness doesn't come from certainty. It isn't psychotic. It comes from shared and practical belief in the party as a necessary form for the political struggle for communism. The party will err. It isn't an omnipotent big other. That it will err doesn't mean we don't need it. The party is the form through which learning and redress is possible. Neo-feudalism is its paranoias and anxieties are not intense in are not in, incompatible. Common and collective practice opens up a way out. With the party, one is no longer the object of the unbearable demands of an inescapable other. One becomes part of the subject who believes the possibility of communism, subject who cares. And that is the end of chapter 4. We'll be going into the conclusion next stream.